With all the content that anyone cares about now released in Wrath Classic, all eyes are on Blizzcon, which is just a matter of days away. There's going to be a few things we're expecting, but I do genuinely believe this year there's going to be something that takes us all by surprise. Breaking down all the facts of what we already know, what we think we know, and using past experiences, let's have a real logical dig into what we think is probably going to be announced at BlizzCon. I think it's fairly safe to assume with the return of Chris Metzen and all the stories that I've heard, he's working on the future lore and direction of retail. So getting another retail expansion announced and a playable demo at BlizzCon itself is probably pretty much on the money. Dragonflight has been one of the best expansions in recent years from what I hear, even though I personally have racked up a total playtime of about 3 hours. With the fact that getting a retail expansion announcement is pretty much just a given going by data mined information, leaks from big Twitch streamers like Towley, and then Bellular covering all of it in great detail, we can just move on to what you guys and girls really care about, World of Warcraft Classic. Firstly, what is Classic Plus? It would be a vanilla version of the game that many know and love, but with extra content. This could be new class and race combos, extra raids, unfinished zones finally finished off, extra quests, and basically anything that doesn't interfere too much with the playstyle of vanilla. There would be some people, maybe even yourself, that would like more class balance or improved talents, but then that could cause the game to lose its charm. We know vanilla is not meant to be balanced, it never was. Class stacking, fairly common, and yes, there's certain specs that you just wouldn't even consider taking to a raid. If any of that started to change or items started to be re-itemized, it could actually ruin what vanilla is all about. If you haven't seen, every man and their dog has been posting on Reddit or putting videos out on every platform that exists talking about Classic Plus coming. There is actually some credibility to the possibility of us getting more content in Classic. When I say Classic, I am specifically talking about Classic era servers, which over the past few months have had a real spike in active players. And to be fair, the servers are doing really, really well. I know many people that raid both on Classic era servers and Wrath and enjoy both. There's been a 1.15 version of the game in development for many months. It was actually around April this year where it was first spotted, and speculation was it was for the hardcore servers, which turned out not to be true, which means for several months something has been going on in the background. My best guess is it's what we've already had confirmed to be coming. A second seasonal server. We had Season of Mastery, which didn't do particularly well, but also didn't go far enough with changes. It would make sense that a much more bolder seasonal server that would take many months of development will come with some surprising changes, and that's what I was alluding to at the start when I said I think there'll be a surprise for all of us. And I think this seasonal server might be a little bit bolder than what the initial Season of Mastery was. I reckon they're going a lot further with this, which could even be considered Classic Plus, especially if it has got class changes and even potentially a new raid. There's been a lot of people, including myself, talking about the fact that a seasonal server doesn't necessarily need to be vanilla. They could do a TBC seasonal server or even a Wrath seasonal server, as Wrath is nearly coming to an end. Thinking about it logically though, the answer should really be no to anything other than vanilla. Seasonal servers can't just have all the characters disappear at the end of the season, they have to have somewhere to go. On the basis, like we've already discussed, Classic era servers are pumping due to people missing the content and wanting to go back and do it, even people losing their hardcore characters but wanting to actually finish those characters off, so they go and finish them off on the era servers. So it makes sense to keep ploughing more and more people towards era. So at the end of the season, having all the retired characters go to era again is just a no-brainer. Would they really want an era version of TBC that barely anyone will ever play? I'd say no, but as a little caveat, I would love to see them spin up fresh servers for Wrath, because when we get to the end of it, there is going to be a lot of people that are not bored of it yet. They still want more Wrath of the Lich King. Let's face it, it's been one of the most popular private servers for many, many years, and I think it would continue to do well, even if it was just sat in its final patch state, so people are just essentially doing Titan Room dungeons, getting geared up, going straight into ICC. But giving people choice and catering to as wide of an audience as possible, I see as a good thing. I wouldn't even rule out a fresh TBC server, because literally in the last week, a fresh TBC private server's launched, and it will do very well. There's still a lot of people who love TBC, so having it there as an option, I just don't see as a bad thing. Even if it is just one server per region, if you fancy a bit of TBC, the option's there. Now to address the whole Classic Plus situation though, I don't see us getting Classic Plus. I hope I'm wrong for everyone that really wants to play the vanilla version of the game but with extra content, but for me personally, and as many of you already know if you've watched me for any amount of time, it's not for me. If they were to release extra content that was never finished off or filled up some of the pointless zones like Ajara for example, it would definitely end up being an experience worth checking out. But due to the way I enjoy the game, which primarily is just raiding, I'd need some extreme changes to draw me back to playing a Classic Era style server, the type of changes that the audience that love Classic Era just wouldn't want. I like all the quality of life changes from Wrath of the Lich King onwards, but fortunately, I don't see future expansions for Classic going anywhere anytime soon, which we'll get onto in a minute. I think the seasonal server that will be announced could be the closest thing to Classic Plus that we're going to get anytime soon. I do already foresee some pretty drastic changes coming to it, but it would really be quite interesting to see that if 1.15, the patch that's been worked on, wasn't actually the seasonal server. Instead, it was actually the next big patch to Classic Era, and it has a new raid, maybe even a couple of dungeons added in. I don't see that happening, but it would be cool. Ultimately, it all really comes down to money. We can sit and hope for what we want, but if Blizzard aren't 100% sure they're going to see a return, it won't be worth the risk. Classic Era, so specifically vanilla or even hardcore servers, are going to be the hardest versions of the game to monetize. People are just not as open to in-game stores, WoW tokens, and all other things that they can comfortably add into future expansions and get minimal pushback. You know, the subscription cost is going to be making them enough money for them to not go hungry this Christmas, but when they put all the time into developing something new, and those of us that are already playing anyway on Classic Era, Wrath, or even Retail, we're essentially getting it for free. So any extra revenue they're going to get is going to have to be either people who have already cancelled their sub coming back specifically for that, or I don't know, people starting second accounts or third accounts or whatever, but ultimately it would need to be new or returning players. So this obviously does significantly reduce the potential revenue that they can get. That's not to say that they couldn't do a Classic Plus that's included in the sub each month but has a box cost, because in my opinion that would be the only way they could do it. But then it would really need more than just some subtle changes to systems like world buffs. We're now talking brand new content from the get-go, be it dungeons, raids, new battlegrounds, and whatever else. Just bringing forward dual spec or adding achievements in and saying, oh, by the way, you can have shamans and paladins on both sides will not warrant, let's say, a $40 box cost. When you then think about all of this, it adds too much risk when they can simply just keep the Classic Era players happy by launching a new server now and then, make a few tweaks and launch a seasonal server each year, and then focus on what really brings the money, Classic expansions and Retail expansions. Because no matter what anyone says about the size of the player base on Wrath versus Classic Era, Wrath will be making money from tokens, boosts, sub deals to get mounts or pets and whatever else they decide to do. This is why if we move on now from Classic Plus and think about Cataclysm, it just makes sense, and I'll be absolutely shocked for us not to get it. I know so many people excited to carry on past the Lich King with their characters, those of us that just love raiding, love getting new tiers, love the progression, and even just love those initial few weeks of getting your character to max level, getting pre-raid bis, and rushing through this content. The first month of any phase or any expansion is just incredibly fun. According to Ironforge Pro's demographics, there was 360,000 people actively doing endgame content in Wrath last week. Remember, these numbers are the number of people doing raiding or doing PvP. There'll be plenty more just leveling or doing dungeons like the new Gammas to get gear, which won't even be counted into this number. But then on the flip side, we need to remember there will be people raiding on multiple characters, so it doesn't show a true number of accounts, but it gives us something to work with. Now let's use that number and absolutely butcher it. Let's say only 1 in 2 people will go on to Cataclysm. Honestly, once people realise Cataclysm is actually pretty amazing and really gets remembered in a poor light for all the wrong reasons, I think it will do really well. It'd need a few changes for sure, but that's something we know Blizzard are open to. The first raid tier is still, in my opinion, the best World of Warcraft has ever seen, which I pretty much mention every time I bring up tier 11 raids. So anyway, let's say out of that 360,000, 180k go on to actively play Cataclysm Classic. We know some of them will be buying WoW tokens throughout its lifetime and paying to move servers, paying to faction change their character to a Worgen or Goblin, among other monetization options. But let's think about the massive initial burst of cash that Blizzard are going to see, the digital deluxe editions. I put out a survey on YouTube a couple of months back asking who had and hadn't bought digital deluxe editions. 52% of people claim to not have bought a digital deluxe edition. That means 48% have. The sample size of this poll was just under 12,000, so it's a good amount to paint a picture. Let's just round up to 50% for easiness and say 90,000 people are now going to buy the Cataclysm Deluxe Edition. We can even use a basic cheap deluxe edition of, let's say, $40. That's $3.6 million that they're going to get just from digital deluxe editions, which, again, this could be underplaying it. I've said only 50% of the people that are raiding are going to go onto cata. I think it's going to be far higher than that. I think far more are going to play Cataclysm than those loud ones like you in the comments saying you will never play Cataclysm. But no matter what you say, let's be fair, even if you was like, oh no, Scott, no way will many people buy it. Oh, we can half it again, who cares? It's still going to be over $1.8 million, which for a multi-billion-dollar company, that isn't that much. But for a small team being able to almost guarantee that kind of figure from a project before it even goes live, which remember, these deluxe editions will be available from the pre-patch, which people who don't even last very long in Cataclysm will probably still buy, just makes releasing Cataclysm just based off digital deluxe editions a more or less no-brainer. So yeah, I think it's safe to assume, I truly believe we will get a retail expansion announcement, a classic vanilla style seasonal server, and Cataclysm Classic. I don't think that's all though. I do think there'll be something else that will surprise us, an announcement that they are working on future content coming to Classic era, even if it's just one extra raid for now. I genuinely could see that happening. I want to be clear, not a full Classic Plus, but an extra raid at some point, so we will just go past 1.14. But that would be nice, so there's more to do post-Nax. And one thing I really hope for is fresh Wrath. Yes, I'm excited to move on to Cataclysm, but I think you all know by now, I'm a bit of a Wrath fanboy, and if there was a fresh server, I would have to play a fresh Wrath server alongside Cataclysm, just because I'm not bored of it yet. I could happily do another Wrath cycle, but on the side, you know, just as a second game. My focus would be on Cataclysm, but I'd love to start fresh Wrath again. Because like we know, the first few tiers take no time to progress at all, so quickly getting Nax on farm and just logging on once a week to do a bit of that, getting Alduar on farm, logging on for a few hours a week to do that. It's not actually a massive time investment, but the raids are still fun. And finally, if you're looking forward to BlizzCon this Friday and Saturday, I will be streaming the whole thing over on kick.com/Scottejaye, so grab a few beers and come join me where we discuss all the announcements in real time. Beer is optional, but recommended. Make sure you tell me in the comments why I'm wrong. I like to have a read through them all. What are your thoughts? What do you think we're going to see at BlizzCon? And then join me when it's live on Friday, and we can see what the outcome was, but this would be my best guess. Consider pressing the join button. It really does help support the channel, and you can join these hundreds of people scrolling along the bottom that have already clicked the join button, and I'll see you on the next one.